You are listening to the Novel Writing Podcast, episode 207. Grab a cup, cozy up, and let's get to writing. Today is part two of my conversation with Seth Ring on author business practices. So, Seth, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Let's just keep going with that business hat. What is your
Yeah.
favorite thing to talk about when it comes to author businesses?
Oh man. This one, you probably already guessed it based on the last episode, but my favorite thing to talk about is absolutely the the two levers that an author has, right? Writing more books or getting more audience. And of the two, writing more books or writing faster or writing better books faster is is I think it edges out getting more audience a little bit. But really, when it comes down to it, these are the two pillars of an author business. And so they are the things that I like talking about. But how to write better books faster, I think, is really that's my like I find a lot of joy. Probably an unnatural amount of joy in that.
Is there any overlap there with Becca Syme? She runs the Better Faster Academy.
So I know Becca, not personally, but we've run in some of the same circles. I'm not familiar with her Better Faster Academy, but I'm definitely going to check it out because I'm always looking for other authors who are doing this well and have figured out how to smooth out some of those bumps. They have that saying, slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
It's so
And
funny you say that because that has been on my mind for like the last couple days with getting sick and
mhm.
feeling behind with my writing. Like I haven't done as much as I wanted to.
Yeah, well, so I've actually been thinking about exactly the same thing. Today I sat down to write. Yesterday I had a great writing day. I did about 15,000 words, and then today I sat down to write, and I realized that in fixing a problem yesterday, I had created knock-on problems for myself. And I sat with it for a little while, and then I realized, you know what? The best thing that I can do at this moment is actually not try to force it. It's to step away. It's to disengage from the problem and give myself the space to actually think it through instead of just trying to force words onto the page and then be frustrated because they weren't the words that I actually wanted. And so I've been thinking about that a lot as well. But the thing is that every author is going to come up with their own system for how to do this, and there's no system that is perfect and complete. You're always going to be able to listen to what somebody else does, to take in what they do and then adjust it so that it works for you, right? And so we're all in this process of constantly improving. So I'm always very excited to find other resources that can encourage writing better faster.
Yep. And I'm going to be talking to Becca in a couple weeks actually for the podcast. So we'll be talking
That's
about
awesome.
lots of stuff with her. I'm very
Yeah.
excited. Next one is how do you separate your writing time from your business time?
Usually poorly is the answer. I'm not always really good at it. I try to be very good at it, or I try to be very regimented. I try to only write in the mornings. And so I have a writing stream that I run, and it's more for my benefit than anybody else's benefit. But I get on YouTube and I stream myself writing, usually from 7 in the morning until or 7:30 until about noon. And that is my concentrated writing time. And so I don't put any pressure on myself to get writing done in the afternoon or in the evening because morning is the time that I've set aside. And so I know that if I have to do something else in the morning, there's a chance that I'm not going to get any writing done. And if I am not focused and on task during those hours, I know that I'm probably not going to get any writing time done, for the day. But at the same time, that also gives me the freedom to just push everything else to the afternoon. To say, I'm not going to take meetings in the morning. I'm not going to get on calls in the morning. I'm not going to, deal with problems in the morning. I'm going to leave those things for later, unless it is something that is genuinely urgent. And often what we think is urgent isn't actually urgent. Somebody waiting a couple hours for a response to an email, that's okay. Somebody not getting a text back immediately, it's actually okay. And I try to be very jealous with that space and with that time. And the writing stream definitely helps because there's some accountability there. But like this morning, like I was just saying, I got on, I ran 4 sprints and then realized I'm actually not effective right here in this space. And so I said, well, we're going to shut it down for today. I'm going to go figure this out. I'm going to go reorder my plot and I'm going to do that somewhere else because that's going to be more efficient. And then I'll see you tomorrow and we'll just do it again. Because it's that consistency ultimately that's going to be the most helpful thing. It's not about how much you get done in any given day. It's about how much you get done over a period of time. And so I'm aiming for consistency over time as opposed to just, absolute pure productivity in any given moment.
So for you then, when you're stepping back from the writing to go replot and reoutline, are you
Mhm.
considering the replotting and reoutlining a business task, or is that still a writing task to you?
That is really a writing task. And so I continued to do, in that sense, I continued to do sort of a writing task. But the difference is that I'm not, the way I plot and outline is a little bit different. I usually completely forget about the story and just focus in as much as possible on other things. And occasionally the story will wander through my head and then I'll like forcefully or intentionally not spend time thinking about it and not spend time trying to figure it out and I'll go and do other things. And then usually within a day or so it has worked itself out in my subconscious and then I can just sit down and it all just sort of tumbles out. And I don't know why that works. I don't know how it works, but that's what I've come to as like the way my brain works is that it sort of like spins on these problems subconsciously. And if I'm doing other tasks that don't require 100% effort or 100% focus, I can I can solve problems in my stories in in parallel. Because what I was trying to do this morning was I was trying to like actually puzzle through the plot and like write down what happens next. And I could not figure it out because I didn't understand, some of the relationships between the characters and motivations and that kind of stuff. And so that's the stuff that I'm figuring out. So this morning I swapped from, at 10 o'clock. Normally I would write until 12. I swapped at that point into meetings for some of the other companies that I run. And so there were business tasks that took up my attention. But at the same time, in the back of my head, I'm slowly spinning on these stories.
So it's funny you mention that because there's a book out there called A Mind for Numbers, which talks about learning how to learn. And that's one of those
Mm,
things where you put all of your direct, acute attention on a problem. And if you can't figure it out, go do something else. And then the diffuse function will
yeah.
take over in the background. And then when you come back a day or a couple hours later, it's going to be like, "Bleh, there's all the answer right there."
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes we in the creative world we don't take seriously enough the mechanisms that our brain has developed over time to be able to do this problem solving, right? And so we get emotional about it because it is frustrating to be sitting in that place and just be like, I can't figure it out. But again, in this, to bring this back to what we were talking about before, what we're looking to do is smooth the process. Because the smoother the process is, the less stressful it's going to be, the greater the degree of creativity we're going to have. I know everybody has this like conception of the tortured genius in their mind, but tortured geniuses very, very, very rarely produce any work worth anything, right? It's more often that the people who we look at as tortured geniuses, their best work was produced when they weren't that way. And then they develop a reputation, and it's those periods um of heavy emotional involvement often often the points in their life when they're the least creative, when they are producing the least, right? And then they'll have this moment of breakthrough. And if you read biographies, of some of the greatest creators, they'll have these moments of breakthrough, and then all of a sudden, for a period of time, they're happy and chipper, and their work works. Their creativity works, and then slowly it'll devolve into, madness again. And so I think sometimes we don't again take seriously enough the fact that our brains are just these incredible problem solving machines. And that applies as much to creativity as it does to the business problems we face. So, in the same way that, when I'm having a creative problem that I can't just figure out, I can't brute force, I'll step away. Well, in the same way, when I'm having a business problem, instead of sitting there banging my head against the wall, getting super frustrated, I'll often clearly identify what the problem is, because that is an important first step, articulate it very clearly, and then I will ignore it. I will simply step away and I will wait and see what happens and either get new information or, more often, just come up with a creative solution while I am not banging my head against the wall. Right. And so on both sides, whether on the creative side or the business side, this method of dealing with frustration or frustrating problems works really, really well.
I think that leads kind of really well into the next question. So what are business things that newer authors should focus on the most? Knowing that you might be going through those cycles of a
Hmm.
lot of creativity into the depths of no creativity at all.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it is the exact opposite. I have strong opinions about this if you can't tell already. It is the exact opposite of what the majority of the advice you're going to get will tell you. Do not focus on the marketing and advertising side. If you are a new author, focus on your craft, focus on your writing, focus on cultivating a core group of fans, and focus on writing. Focus on your systems and your processes. I don't remember if he is quoting somebody or if it's just his own genius, but in Atomic Habits, there's this quote that I just absolutely love, which is, we don't rise to the level of our opportunities, we fall to the level of our systems. And one of the things that I see over and over again in newer authors, especially newer authors who have a little bit of a hit, even actually a fantastic hit, right? Anybody who has a story and it goes out into the world and people like it a lot and they're clamoring for more. The maximum amount of time that somebody can keep up in that state is like a year and a half. And then the lack of systems, I see this over and over again. Lack of systems will come in and will just cut their legs right out from under them. And the ensuing frustration and the ensuing dip, because they've just dropped all of the balls they were juggling, is crushing. And they start to think to themselves, man, is it my writing? Is the problem that I'm not a good author? What is the problem that I just am bad at everything? No, the problem is that you can't sustain the kind of activity that you need to do to run a business, and you can't sustain the kind of activity you need to do to to be creative in the long term without systems. You can't do it without the structure in place that's going to allow you to to actually make progress. I get this image in my mind of someone trying to, this is probably such a weird thing, right? But somebody trying to build a tower up to up to the sky, right? And all they're doing is placing a brick under one foot, a brick under the other foot, and then lifting their first foot and putting a second brick down, and then lifting their second foot and putting a brick down. Yeah, they're gonna rise up into the air. If you just put one brick under one foot and one brick under the other foot and repeat that action, you'll get high and you'll get there fast. But there is no stability. And as soon as that tower that you've made collapses, you're going to have to start all over. And the alternative is the person who actually places a foundation and actually builds a tower underneath them and rises with their tower. They're going to do it slower because they have to place more bricks. It's more time consuming to raise each level. But their tower is also not going to fall over, right? They're going to have that steady climb, and then eventually they're going to be at a height that the first person could simply never get to. So I think that when you are starting out, it's really it's really tempting to look at authors who are ahead of you and say, I want what they have. What do they have? Well, visibly, they have fans that talk to them. They have, fame or some level of notoriety. People recognize them. And it's easy to think to yourself, okay, that's what I need. That's what that's what I am shooting for. And so however I can get that is going to determine whether I've succeeded or not. Whenever I talk to authors who have very steady careers and are doing it full time and have a strong audience, and normally these are the people who are in the, mid to high six figures, seven figure range or beyond, all of them have a core audience that just buys their books, that doesn't talk to them, that doesn't acknowledge they exist. They just buy the books. And so when we're talking about, again, specific activities that new authors should be focusing on, it's write the best book you could possibly write more of that book, write another one after that, and another one after that, and then focus on developing a core group of very loyal fans without just trying to attract everybody. The attraction for everybody will come. And whether you're a product brand or whether you're a personality brand, you should be doing the same thing. If you're a product brand, it is very much build your newsletter list, figure out what your funnel is, be very diligent about delivering content on schedule for your fans. If you're a personality brand, do the same thing. Obviously, deliver content regularly, deliver good content, but talk to your core audience. Don't worry about attracting new people. Don't worry about trying different advertising avenues or different advertising strategies. Don't worry about joining marketing mailings or newsletter blasts or doing promos. Like, don't worry about any of that stuff. Talk to your core audience on whatever platform you've chosen and be very consistent about engaging with those people. And in both cases, you will naturally build over time, but you want to make sure that tower that you're building is really, really solid, that you have the right kind of content, that you have the right kind of audience match, that you can keep up the cadence. I I ran into an author who started writing about 2 years ago, and he had a smash right out of the gate, which was really cool to see. And I met him at a couple conventions, and we chatted a little bit, and then we talked online a little bit, and he kept up this really aggressive pace for about a year and a half. And then something happened in his life that was a little bit outside of his control, and it was like House of Cards, man. It sucked, but the entire thing just came tumbling down because he could not maintain his cadence because life happened. He had been throwing all of this energy and focus and this sort of brute force into writing super, super, super fast because he saw other people doing it. I was one of those people. But my writing schedule is built on 5 years of slowly working up to it. It's not built on, hey, I just started writing and now I'm going to write 12 hours a day. Like, no, no, it doesn't work. So anyway, all that to say, I think the primary tasks you want to be focusing on as a new author are about building the core of your business, not about attracting attention, not about having a smash success or international fame. If you get there, awesome. But if you get there without having the foundation of your business built, it is going to be insanely hard to maintain. It will be unbelievably difficult for you. And having to build the boat as you are launching it is honestly awful and is just not recommended. So anything you can do to avoid that, avoid it.
So, for listeners who maybe aren't sure what you mean when you say a system, can you just give a high level overview of what that might look like?
Sure, I have a ton of different systems in place, right? I have my creative systems about how I write books. Every author has one, whether you know it or not. Mine is very specific because I know how I want to write a book and all of that. and I know what kind of result that I want. But I also have business systems, and these are things that you just need to have in place. Otherwise, you give yourself a headache, right? So, for instance, who does your taxes? That is one of the systems. Who handles your finances? That is one of the systems. Now, the system you have, because again, everybody has a system. It's whether it's a good system or not. So if your system is, I look at my bank account every time I get a notification that it's been overdrawn, that is a bad system. That is a awful system, right? If it is, I look at my bank account every month or two, then that is not as bad a system because you're not overdrawing, hopefully, but it's still not a good system. If your system is I I pay attention to my earnings and I project what I'm going to get based on past results, that's a better system because that allows you to make better decisions about how you're going to run your business, about what you're going to be able to afford in the future, about whether it's worth it to pay the dollar, the 500,000, $2,000 for a cover because you know what kind of result you got before from taking action. And when you turn it into a dollar number, all of a sudden you can say, ooh, maybe that $1,000 cover wasn't actually a good idea because I probably could have gotten one just as good for 50 bucks on Fiverr. And even if it wasn't quite as good, I probably would have had roughly the same sales and $950 in my pocket. And so the system is what allows you to make the decision because the system gathers data for you. On the marketing side, I have a system around a launch. Now, sometimes my system in the past has just been write the book, put it on KDP, throw it into the wild, see what happens. That's not a good system. Instead, having a system that says, okay, these are the places where I know I'm going to be posting about this book to promote it because these are the communities where it's my readers gather, right? And I know that 2 weeks before I post in this specific Facebook group, I have to contact the moderators to make sure that there's an open slot. Okay, cool. That's part of my system. 2 weeks before a launch, that needs to be on my calendar so that I can contact the moderator so that I can post in 2 weeks, right? So systems gather data, systems provide consistency that help us not lose all of the tasks, right? So we're not juggling all of these different tasks and trying to keep everything in our mind. Systems create frameworks that automate action. And that's what we want in a business. So for instance, when somebody messages me on my website, if my website, if the email that goes to my website just sits in an inbox somewhere and I never log into it, then that is a bad system. If I log in once every 2 months to read through emails that people or messages, contact messages that somebody sent me months ago, that's not a great system. If I take the 15 seconds to forward them to my email that I check every day, and then I filter them from there into different folders so I know what what needs to be dealt with immediately, what can be dealt with in a week, what can be, what is just informational and I don't need to deal with it at all, what's spam, all of that kind of stuff. That's a system that's going to help me do all of these things more efficiently, answer the messages more efficiently, keep track of the information I need to keep track of more efficiently. And so whenever we're whenever we're taking an action, it belongs to a system. And that's why this quote is so good, right? We fall to the level of our systems. And so if because everybody's got them, right? Systems, everybody has one. It's just, is it a bad system? Because the result you're going to get will ultimately be bad. Again, in the short term, you can force it. And I think that's where a lot of people get trapped is that they force so many things that everything is overwhelming and they feel like they're stuck juggling. I remember when I was younger watching a hilarious juggling show. And it was like a magician and there was a juggler. And then one of the jugglers started juggling something and then the other jugglers kept lighting torches and throwing them at the dude. And so he would have to catch them and he would have to keep juggling them. But the problem was that at a certain point, there were so many torches that he was juggling so fast that he couldn't actually like pass them back without without causing problems. He's going to drop something, and you don't want to drop a flaming torch. They resolved it by the other guys coming over and taking stuff from him, right? As he's juggling them. It was very impressive. And sometimes that's what we need. We need a system or another person sometimes that's going to be able to take some of those tasks away from us so that we're not juggling all of the torches simultaneously. It's okay to juggle two or three or four things at once, but we don't want to have to juggle everything. And so our systems are what give us the breathing room to be able to properly deal with each task as we need to deal with it without getting completely overwhelmed because there's just so much to deal with.
Good systems
So,
make our lives easier.
very much so. Systems make our lives so much easier.
Yeah. There,
Yeah.
on the juggling analogy, I think it might have been Aaron Winters with this one. If not, then I apologize. But it was you're juggling a bunch of balls in your life, but some of them are glass. And you
Hmm.
have to identify which balls are glass so that you don't drop those balls. The other balls can
That's
be
right.
dropped and nothing will break, but if you drop the glass ones, then there's going to be problems.
Absolutely. And sometimes what looks like glass isn't glass. And sometimes what doesn't look like glass ends up being glass. And so it's not always easy to tell what tasks are that vital. So for instance, writing, and we talked about this in the last episode, writing is the core function of your business. It's something that only you can do. And it's something that if it doesn't happen, nothing else will work. And so if you don't keep juggling that specific ball, the entire thing falls apart, right? And that one's a ball that like you can put it back together. That's a glass ball that you can reconstruct and you can get, you can rebuild it. Sometimes there are things that you can't rebuild. So, relationships with people. Throughout my writing career, one of the things that has just really sort of struck me and that I am continually reminded of is that the relationships that we have really ultimately determine where we go and what we do. My writing career is almost entirely due to my wife making space for me to do this. And so my ability to push as hard as I pushed or to make the decisions that I've made have been in concert with another person. But what that also means is that if I am not building a system that allows the room for my relationship with my wife, that's going to degrade. My relationship is inevitably going to degrade. And if it does, it will then impact everything else that I do. It will have a significant impact on everything else that I do. And so systems make things easier, but they also provide us the boundaries that we really need in order to, again, safeguard those glass balls, to make sure that we don't end up inadvertently through our exuberance breaking things that cannot be mended. And, by the Lord's grace, we can mend broken relationships. But it's better to just not break them in the first place. It's better
Yeah.
to keep them intact.
So I'm guessing that the answer to this next one is going to have something to do with systems. And I know there are different schools of thought about systems versus goals,
Mhm.
but how do you break down your author business goals to keep yourself on track toward them?
That is a great question because I am and have always been very bad with goals. I am just bad at goals. Part of that
Which
is
is
that I
hilarious because you have so many books done and you it's just yeah, it's hilarious to say that you're like you're not good at goals when people look at your catalog of books and be like, how does he do that?
so interestingly, I do it by not focusing on goals. Um, I do it through systems, right? I have a system for finishing a book and I just run the system. So my background is in programming. So I was an application developer for some years, and then I got into sales, and both of those fields use very strict systems where you put an input in one side and you get an output out the other side. And so on the programming side, I was responsible for building systems where you could put an input in and get a predictable outcome every single time. If I push the button, a very specific thing happens, right? If somebody gives me a number, I manipulate it in a specific way, I get a specific outcome. In sales, it's a little bit more complicated. I have a sales funnel. I have a specific script. I am talking to a prospect and I want to move them through my sales funnel. And there are different points where I might lose the customer, right? They might slip outside of the sales funnel. But I have all of these different methodologies and systems for keeping them in the funnel and then getting them to the end. And the outcome that I want is a sale. Well, it turns out that writing books is the same in that I can have an idea and I can work through that idea in a predictable way. And as long as I work through the idea in a predictable way and I engage with the activity according to the system that I've set, by the time I am done, I will have a book. Now, whenever I talk about this, I often get looks, but there's no like the only guarantee that I'll get a good book is that I put in the correct effort in the middle. And there's no guarantee that if I put an idea into one end of the system, that I will get a good book out in a specific amount of time. Sometimes a book is very quick. Sometimes it takes a lot longer. Sometimes I run into issues where I hit a wall and I can't figure it out and I have to put the book aside and I know I'll come back to it eventually, but it's not as good as I want it to be. And so I'm going to mess around with it, further. But generally speaking, I can put an idea in one side of my system and then, a couple of weeks later, I have a book out the other end.
That's because you
And
dictate.
it's because I dictate. But even if I wasn't dictating, it would just be a longer time horizon. The time frame would be extended, but I would still have the same, it's still a process, right? It's still a system that I'm running over and over and over again in order to achieve a thing. The problem that I have with goals, and I know, I know there is a lot of debate on this, and people who study this and know way more about this than I know about it are also divided on this, right? Or how specifically goals should be structured for the best result, all of that kind of stuff. The problem I have with goals is that every time I set a goal, if I achieve it, invariably listless. I invariably lose all motivation. I don't know what to do with myself. I wander around annoying my wife. It just I turn into I become rootless. And then I'll think about, okay, maybe I should have another goal. But it's like, well, I know I'm going to achieve what I'm setting out to achieve. And and this is weird to say out loud, but my success is inevitable. I'm either going to succeed in whatever it is that I'm trying to do, or I will fail and I will learn and I will try again. And if I die someday before before achieving whatever it is that I was trying to do on that day or in that week or in that month or in that year, whatever I was like currently working on, that's okay because I was pursuing the thing, right? I was working towards whatever it is that I'm working towards in that given moment. And ultimately my satisfaction and my fulfillment is not in my work anyways. And so I don't have to be so concerned about achieving a goal. In fact, in a lot of ways, it's better to constantly work toward perfection than it is to achieve perfection. Because, first of all, you can't. And so anything that you achieve that feels like perfection to you is false, right? That it's not actually perfect. There's always something that can be improved. There's always a better way to do something. There's always some minutia that you could have done, right? You could have done it faster. You could have done it with less headaches. You could have done it smoother. You could have done it and more people could have seen it, right? There's always something to improve. And so for me, the pursuit has really become the goal. It's I am going to get better at writing books until I die and can no longer write books. I don't know, maybe we'll be able to write books in heaven,
I'm counting on it.
right? And even then, I'm sure that I will continue to get better, right? So I think for me, I have sort of just slowly stopped setting goals. That's not entirely true. I've stopped setting achievable goals. I want to write a perfect book as fast as humanly possible. That is my goal for writing. I want to write a perfect book as fast as humanly possible. Well,
Knowing that it won't ever be perfect.
that's the thing is
So it's
that
the journey.
I'm going to get as close as I possibly can. And maybe other people are going to look at it and be like, "Wow, that's like perfect." But I'll always be able to tell that it could have been a little bit better. That there's something about it that I could have improved upon. And that's cool because then that gives me something to wake up the next morning and pursue. Some people in their business, like to move this out of the craft space and into the business space, some people have dollar amounts, right? And that's how I started. I was very laser focused on I would like to earn X number of dollars in a given year or on a given launch. And then when I hit those numbers, I went, oh, this kind of sucks because tomorrow I have to wake up and I have to just do it again. And then the next day I just have to do it again. And it's not like money is not one of these things that like you put it on your shelf and it stays there. Like, no, you constantly spend it. And so you have to go out and earn more. And then
Unless you're
when the
Scrooge
number,
McDuck and then you have just a whole pool of it you dive into.
right? But if you end up, aiming for Scrooge McDuck numbers, eventually you'll get there and you'll have the same thought. It's like, okay, above a certain level, money just stops making a difference in your life and it's just a metric for tracking success, right? It's just a metric for determining how much other people value what you do. But if that's your only way of determining whether what you produce is good or not, you have a different, I don't know, there's a different problem there. So I think that for me, I have really largely disengaged from those kinds of goals as a measure for success. At the same time, I am very clear about what my business goals are, right? I would like to, I'll just be like as transparent as I possibly can here. I'm launching a new series, and I'm going back to self-publishing, and I have very specific number goals for what I would like to earn by the end of the year on this series, given that I'm going to release 5 books in the series probably this year, right? And I have a very specific, like, this is what I want to make from Amazon only on this series. Then I'm going to calculate, okay, in addition to that, I have royalties from audio that are going to come in. Part of that through advance because I'm sub licensing my audio. Part of that through I want to sell through that advance and I want to make money beyond that. Then I have, okay, here are all of my other series. What numbers are they doing? Every time I'm looking at those, I'm saying, okay, what should my goal be for this product that I sell? What kind of advertising goal do I have, right? How many clicks am I aiming to pick up or how many sales am I aiming to get? What kind of ACoS do I want on it? What kind of ROAS do I want on it? Like there are all of these metrics that I'm identifying to track and then concrete sales goals that I am also identifying and tracking. But those are a little bit different because those have nothing to do with how successful I feel like I am. Those are just if I want my business to run, if I want to be able to expand my business and hire people to help me run my business, those are numbers I need to hit. I need to be able to make payroll. And so I have to hit those numbers. If, on the other hand, you're not interested in hiring people, If you're just interested in writing and publishing and doing that kind of thing, then those numbers can be a lot lower than mine are going to be. At the end of the day, it's important to distinguish the kinds of goals that you're setting. It's important to distinguish when something is just a business goal, right? I want to grow my business by, by 20% a year. If I want to grow by 20% a year, that means that if I sold, $100,000 last year, I have to sell what, $120,000 this year. Like that's math. That's it's a goal, yeah, but it's really just math.
It's separating emotion from staying alive, basically.
Yeah,
We're supporting
absolutely.
your, yeah. Because if you don't, for authors like you, if you don't sell books, if you don't make money, then your life suffers.
That's right.
Yeah. So for people who want to be full time, then it's about separating the achievement based, emotion based goals from, is this going to make me money and make my life better in a monetary sense?
Absolutely, which is why for people who want to be full time in it, getting awards is not the goal. That is not the goal that you need. You need a dollar goal. You need to sell books and earn money. And anything you do that is aimed at generating, awareness of your books without translating it into sales is poison. Because if you are chasing recognition, if you're chasing awards, if you're chasing accolades for your writing, and it is not translating into dollars, which it normally doesn't, you you are not going to be able to continue doing what you want to do. And too many people get stuck in that, oh, I've got to chase the bestseller lists, I've got to chase those things. Let me tell you, there are a ton of people, I know a lot of them, who are out here making mid six figures. Nobody knows who they are. Like, if you mention them on the street, the mass majority of people just will have no idea who they are, but they have 20 to 30,000 loyal readers who are buying all of their books, right? And they're putting out 4 or 5 books a year, and they are making great money, right? And their life is stable and secure. And then if they want to chase an accolade, they can. If they want to improve their craft and submit for an award, they can. If they want to try and get that recognition, they can. And they can do it without their life suffering as a result.
It's so funny because if something is listed as on a bestseller list, I'm probably going to just not pay attention.
That is honestly the way of it, because so many of these books that have ended up on bestseller lists and the criteria by which these books are chosen just don't translate into things that most people want to read. And so if you adjust your writing to get on one of those lists or to meet that criteria, unfortunately, it is it's likely that you're just not going to be able to sell books, which stinks. Like, that's not great. It'd be
But
nice
if you
if there was some overlap there.
but if you can't sell books, you also can't sell things that people like to add on top of the books, which is the last question I want to
That's
cover
right.
today.
Oh, sure.
So writing is the number one most important thing that a new author can do.
Yes.
But at some point, they're going to be seeing all the Kickstarters, all the people selling merch, and being like, okay,
Yeah.
when can I be doing that? Because at the end of the day, if you do it successfully, it's going to add to your streams of income.
It will. Man, so I'm gonna say something that is controversial.
I like your spicy takes on things. Go for it.
So I have been around long enough to recognize the trends in the internet guru space. And there is a trend that has come up a couple of times in my life as a person trying to sell things online, which started way before books, by the way, very unsuccessfully. Disaster upon disaster. I had a bunch of businesses, none of them worked. And it had to do with this sort of specific thing. There is no case except one, which we'll talk about in a second, where adding another stream of business, like another business line, will make you more money than just doing the singular business line you are already doing successfully better. So, that is to say, if I am successfully selling books on Amazon and I have a streamlined business selling books on Amazon, adding a Kickstarter will not add more money for the volume of work than simply spending that volume of work on my Amazon business, writing more books, and selling better on Amazon, right? This is a hard and fast rule. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't diversify. That's not to say you shouldn't do all of these other things. Just understand that they will never be as profitable as your primary thing. They might be fun though, and there is something to be said for having fun. And so maybe it's worth it. And maybe they'll bless your audience, right? And maybe ultimately what you're doing is you're investing in marketing. Kickstarter is a great example of this. It's a tremendous amount of work, and it in no cases makes more money than just spending that same amount of time writing and publishing more books. Now, and I will actually back this to the bank, right? So a great example that people like to sort of point to is the unicorn in the room, which is Brandon Sanderson, who did $43 million in a Kickstarter for 4 unreleased books. If he had taken those to publishers and auctioned each of the books, he would have made more than $43 million, and he would not have had the headache of all of the Kickstarter stuff. Now, he has a team of 160 people-ish. They handle all of the headache. He didn't have to worry about it at all. But he would have made more money just going to publishers. What he wouldn't have done is he wouldn't have created one of the best marketing mechanisms for his business that has ever been created. Because having the top earning book Kickstarter of all time is crazy. Like, that is an insane marketing mechanism.
Like he
And
broke
so,
Kickstarter.
yeah, very much so. And so the the value of doing these additional streams of income is often secondary into, like, the money that you make from it is often secondary to the actual benefit of diversifying. Now, there is one instance in which diversifying is actually better, and that is when you are in the wrong business. If you are running a business and you diversify and you are suddenly making more money doing something else, then you should have been doing that other thing in the first place. Change your business. Okay. Other than that, though, other than that, again, diversifying is not for making more money. Diversifying is for the secondary benefits, and the money you make is there to offset the annoyance of having to do something different, build new systems, train new people, outsource new tasks, learn new things yourself, right? Because every time you run a every time you diversify your business line, you are essentially starting a new business. And so running a Kickstarter is a different thing than running an ad campaign on Facebook. The way Kickstarter ads work and the way book ads work, completely different on every platform. Understanding the Kickstarter algorithm, understanding that it's a pay to win model, understanding that if you want virality on there, there are very specific things you have to do and very specific people that you have to know in a given vertical. There are all of these things about it that you don't know until you've done it and take a tremendous amount of time and effort to learn. Now, if you have a strong audience, you can trade that in for immediate value on something like Kickstarter. One of the problems with that, though, is that you are cashing in on trust. Okay? And this is a concept that is very important. Anytime in a business somebody steps out of the specific customer role that they exist in and trusts you to buy something else that is outside of your business line, a secondary product, a service, something like that. They are spending trust to do so. And that trust doesn't always come back. Because if they didn't like the thing that they got, the secondary thing or the tertiary thing that they got, as much as the primary thing that they originally bought from you, they will trust you less the next time you give them a product. But it's not just when you give them a product that is, again, a secondary product or a tertiary product. When you give them a primary product, they will also trust you less because they have now had a bad experience. And even if it's not a bad experience, even if it's just a neutral experience, that trust will erode over time, right? And so we want to be very careful when we are talking about diversifying what we're doing and how we're doing it and why we're doing it. Diversifying for the sake of improving your relationship with your core audience, great idea. Running a Kickstarter that you're not expecting to make money on, but you're hoping to break even, let's say, and you are just trying to deliver A+ books, really, really nice editions of your books to your core audience. And it's like, hey, however many you guys want, that's how many we're going to buy. I'm doing this sort of as a service to my audience. I'm going to make it as convenient as possible for you. That's a great thing to do if you have the bandwidth to do it. Again, what you're doing there though, the money is secondary. What you're doing there is you are reinforcing your community. You are reinforcing your relationship with your audience. The earning lots of money on it is just not a thing. So one of the and again, Kickstarter is a great example because most other secondary lines of business like merch, that kind of stuff, they fall into the same category. If you run a Kickstarter for your books and you get a really nice edition, right? And you charge, let's say, $50 for your nice edition of this book, and you you have 1,000 people who come to you and say, okay, I'm gonna buy this book. You might be buying the books for, a nice edition. You might be buying them for $12 to $15, right? And you might think to yourself, oh man, I buy it for $12 or $15 and I sell it for 50. That's a that's a pretty good deal. Unfortunately, that is only part of the cost, right?
Shipping.
Yeah. And when you're shipping books, guess what? It's paper. It's super heavy. It sucks. And so shipping is going to add another $3 or $4 to all of your to the cost, right? And so let's say we're setting about, $18 to $19. Well, you also have a fee on Kickstarter. They're going to take some of your money, right? Your payment processing is also going to take some money. And so now you're down to probably $20 in costs to get them shipped somewhere. If you are not doing the fulfillment, which if you have 1,000 of these to send out, you don't want to do the fulfillment. If you're not doing the fulfillment, there's another probably 20% fee on top of that, right? All of these things start adding up. And then you get into minimum order quantities. If you want the cool gilt edge or the sprayed edge, they're going to cost you a lot more than $15 unless you're buying 2,500 or 3,000 or 4,000 of these books. But if you buy 4,000 books, even at $15 a pop, if you only had 1,000 people order them, you've now got 3,000 books that you have to do something with. And,
Storage.
right? So all of these things add up. And it's not to say that you can't make money on Kickstarter. I know people who are making money on Kickstarter. But Kickstarter, I have a business. I run a board game company and we do stuff on Kickstarter, right? Kickstarter is really valuable, but its primary value is not actually as a sales mechanism. It is as a marketing tool. So, when do you diversify? I'm going to beat my drum. Don't. Until you have enough bandwidth in your business, until you have enough people or the ability to hire enough people that you can keep all of your core functions running while you are building out the campaign, while you are commissioning art, while you are dealing with all of the headaches of, international logistics, while you are doing all of that stuff, you have to be able to keep your core business running. And it has to be humming along at the same rate that it was before. So as soon as you have enough bandwidth in your business to add something, to add a whole new business, then maybe consider diversifying. Honestly, merch is kind of the same thing. It's a trap. I remember when I was starting as a writer, everybody was like, "Get merch. Your people are like your audience is going to love it." They don't tell you how much it costs to get the art in the first place. They don't tell you how much time it takes to put a website together. They don't tell you how annoying it is to have to keep up with all of that, as the companies that you have set up to drop ship your shirts tell you, hey, we don't have that size anymore. And then you go and you look and they're like, oh, actually, we do have the size. We just switched providers. So you now have to go through every single product and click to change the provider because we won't automate that for you. The management cost is a real thing. And too often we just are oblivious to it when we're imagining this rosy world of like, oh, I'll do this thing and I'll make money. It just money's hard to
So,
earn.
so the short answer is don't diversify, just write more books.
That is the answer that I always tell people. Again, there is a moment. There is a moment when you can diversify. Brandon Sanderson can diversify all he wants because he is in a position where his books sell and his brand is established, and everything he does from here on out is an amplifier to his core business. And maybe that's the best way to put it. Don't diversify until what you're doing amplifies your core business as opposed to distracting from it.
I think that is a really great way to end today.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank
As
you
you
for
can
coming
tell, I
back.
love talking about this stuff.
I know I could just talk for several more hours. Well, thank you again.
For sure.
All right, everybody, that is it for today's episode. Thanks for joining us, and remember, the first draft is supposed to be garbage. The Novel Writing Podcast is a production of Colleen Mitchell Writes. For more writing resources, including Curios, Tally Inc. author services, and the 60-day novel writing challenge, check out the links in the description.